Challenge rating. The seemingly arbitrary number assigned to each monster's stat block that tells us whether this monster will be a good fit for our party or smash them into tiny little pieces. But what does this number actually mean? How is this number assigned to different monsters? And most importantly, should we bother paying attention to it? Hello again everyone, I'm Bill, admin and instructor over on Altroll, and today I want to examine how challenge rating actually works in D&D 5th edition and whether it's important for game masters to truly understand. To get started with challenge rating, we need to know how the source books define it. According to the introduction of the Monster Manual, challenge rating is a number assigned to monsters that tell you how threatening that monster is. It does this by estimating the number of adventurers of a particular level that should be able to defeat the monster without suffering any deaths. A well-rested party of 4 should be able to defeat a monster whose challenge rating is equal to the party's level without any party members dying. For example, a party of 4 to 6 level 5s can typically defeat a monster with a challenge rating of 5 without having any of the party members die. Unfortunately, if the party has less than 4 or more than 6 party members, challenge rating becomes a little less accurate. Challenge rating can range from 0 all the way up to 30. Challenge ratings of 0 through 1 represent monsters that are significantly weaker than first level characters and thus should only be used in large numbers. Challenge ratings of 1 through 20 represent the difficulty in our previous assumption, where one monster of each challenge rating can be defeated by a party of the same level without any of the characters dying. Challenge ratings of 20 or greater represent a great challenge to any adventuring party, and are designed to test the skills of the party regardless of game balance. Now that we understand how Wizards of the Coast defines challenge rating, what comes into account for how they slap that number onto all the various monsters provided in the source books? Well, we do get a hint of how this works at the end of the Dungeon Master's Guide in Chapter 9. Under the section titled Creating a Monster, the Dungeon Master's Guide provides us with this chart for helping to determine the challenge rating of a homebrewed monster based on its various stats. For example, a challenge rating 3 monster will have a proficiency bonus of +2, an armor class of 13, 101 to 115 hit points, a +4 attack bonus, do 21 to 26 damage per round, and have a save DC of 13 for spells and abilities. Now, this table is just for generating quick stats, and Chapter 9 has more in-depth instructions that take into account concepts like effective hit points, advantage and disadvantage, and more. However, using this as a guideline may not help anyways, as according to a recent D&D Creator Summit, Jeremy Crawford, lead rules designer for 5th edition and 1D&D, said the following: "The CR calculation guide in the DMG is wrong and does not match our internal CR calculation method." So when it comes to challenge rating and how it's applied to monsters, we really don't know exactly how to apply it, since the methods we're given in the source books don't even match how Wizards of the Coast calculates it. Essentially, it's an imperfect system, filled with judgment calls and inaccuracies, but is it worth understanding and using as a dungeon master? Well, we have a bit more to examine before we can make that call. If challenge rating represents a single monster's danger in facing a party of equal level, how does using multiple monsters fit into game balance and combat calculations? Well, unfortunately for us, this is where the Dungeon Master's Guide requires us to do some math. First up, it's important to note that challenge rating impacts how much XP a party member gets when a creature is killed, as seen on this table. If we want to introduce multiple monsters into an encounter, we have to take the number of monsters in the combat encounter, Compare that to the encounter multipliers table from Chapter 3 of the Dungeon Master's Guide to determine which multiplier we need. Multiply the XP value of each monster in the encounter by the appropriate multiplier from the table, and then total those adjusted numbers for all the monsters in the encounter to get the monster's adjusted XP value. Once we get that number, we compare that to the party's XP threshold, calculated using another table from Chapter 3 of the DMG. There are 4 XP thresholds for each character level, one for each category of encounter difficulty: easy, medium, hard, and deadly. We use a character's level to determine their XP thresholds, repeat this process for every member of the party, and then total up the 4 difficulty level thresholds. Once we have the party's thresholds, we compare the monster's adjusted XP value to the party's XP thresholds to determine what difficulty that group of monsters poses to the party. If there's no direct match, we use the next lowest threshold. As an example of this, let's take some zombies, a basic undead creature, and throw it against a party of 4 level 2 adventurers. Let's start first with the party's XP threshold, since that won't change. A level 2 adventurer has an easy threshold of 50 XP, a medium threshold of 100 XP, a hard threshold of 150 XP, and a deadly threshold of 200 XP. Since we have 4 level 2 party members, we can multiply these thresholds by 4 to determine the party's total thresholds. Thus, easy would be 200 XP, medium would be 400 XP, hard would be 600 XP, and deadly would be 800 XP. Now that we've got those set up, let's look at the monsters. The zombie is a CR 1/4 creature that is worth 50 XP when killed. Since we're using a party of 4, let's throw an equal amount of zombies against the party and see how they stack up. Using the encounter multipliers table, we know that using 4 monsters requires us to multiply the zombies' XP by 2 to represent their adjusted XP value. So, each zombie would be worth 100 adjusted XP, and 4 zombies would be 400 adjusted XP. Now, we take the monster's adjusted XP and compare it to those thresholds we calculated earlier. 400 XP of the zombies would represent a medium difficulty encounter for a party of 4 level 2 adventurers. So, if we wanted it to be a bit harder, we'd have to add in a couple more zombies and then recalculate their threshold. I'll save you the math and just tell you that 6 zombies comes out to 600 adjusted XP, thus making them a hard combat encounter for the party. So, obviously, DMs should totally use this very straightforward system to balance their combat encounters every time, right? They totally shouldn't use the very accessible D&D Beyond encounter builder to do all of this math for them, right? That would take away all of the fun of doing all of this math anytime you want to add an additional monster to a combat encounter. And who would want to deprive themselves of the sheer joy of comparing numbers to a multiplicative table to determine arbitrary difficulty? In all seriousness though, there are digital tools out there that make this process way easier, and those will be linked in the description below if you want to check them out. The main point of me explaining all of this is to show that having different numbers of monsters changes their relative difficulty to the party, thus making their challenge rating not representative of their true danger. So when it comes to using monsters in groups, challenge rating is effectively useless. So to summarize, challenge rating is a guideline meant to represent a monster that can challenge a party of 4 of a certain level without killing any of them. But if the party has more or less than 4 to 6 members, or if multiple monsters are thrown at the party, we have to ignore challenge rating and instead look at XP calculations to determine whether the fight will be easy, medium, hard, or deadly. With all this in mind, does challenge rating work as a combat balancing tool for D&D 5th edition? Well, not really. As with most things in D&D, combat balancing has to take in a ton of situational factors that the sourcebooks can't account for in challenge rating. Things like initiative order, ambushes, terrain features, critical hits and failures, positioning, and much more can make a creature more or less dangerous in combat. There are also some monsters with unique abilities that many in the community believe don't fit their challenge rating, such as the infamous Shadow and its Strength Drain ability. But if CR doesn't work, should we bother paying attention to it at all then? Well, believe it or not, yes we should. Challenge rating is best used as a loose guide for DMs, a rule of thumb for them to approximate what monsters they should be looking at when trying to find something for their party to fight, then tailoring that fight to fit the specifics of the combat scenario, such as how many party members there are, how many spell slots and hit points they have, where they're positioned on the battle map, and so on and so forth. Remember that once you use challenge rating to narrow down what monsters you want to choose, you need to read their stat block, analyze their abilities and stats, and use your best judgment as a dungeon master to balance the combat for your specific party. So that's challenge rating in a nutshell. A good guideline for finding monsters to pit against the party, but definitely not a foolproof mechanic for balancing combat encounters. So what do you all think about it? Will you be using it for your monster selection? Or do you prefer some other method to choosing which monsters your party will face? You can let me know over on the Alt-Roll Discord, which is linked in the description alongside our Ko-fi if you feel like supporting our server and the channel. But that's everything I had for all of you today. Thank you again for supporting us here, and make sure to have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see all of you next time.